What's going on, everyone? I'm here with Jeff Snider of Gradient AI. Welcome to the Claims Podcast. Jeff, it's great to have you. Thanks so much for being on.
Thanks, Matt. I'm looking forward to it.
So I think the first question, given your wide-ranging background, is how did you land in claims? Could you give us a little bit of a story or your journey into what you're doing today?
Sure. So my background is over 30 years as a lawyer, the first almost 10 in private practice. And during that time, I did a lot of commercial work, a lot of bankruptcy work. I regularly managed claim loads in the thousands. I then went in-house, and I've been an in-house public company general counsel for the last 20-something years before joining Gradient AI. And in that entire time, the holy grail was, what I think of as a crystal ball. If you're looking at large numbers of claims, the trick is to figure out, okay, which ones are going to be really bad, which are the ones that I need to focus my time and resources on. If you are focused on a really bad claim, I was used to getting the question from my CEO or my board, are we going to win this one or lose one? Just give me a number, right? What are our percentage chances?
Right.
How much is this going to cost? Just give me a number. It's difficult because even somebody with a lot of experience managing claims has only seen so many claims, and humans are only good at processing a few data inputs. And what I always wanted was the ability to say, look, I don't know everything. I haven't seen every claim. Let's look at what we do know, and let's try to make some assumptions based on that. And what AI does is gives us that crystal ball. An AI or machine learning model has the ability to look at all of the facts that we give it. And it's more than just, my experience or my outside counsel's experience or, my claims manager's experience. It's all of the claims in the database and has an ability to look into those and say, okay, well, the claim that you're facing now is, a lot more like these claims than is like those claims, and here's how these claims turned out. The ability to be part of something like that to solve this problem that that I've struggled with for my 30+ year career, and to be able to do it as a principal was just really exciting, and has proven to be exactly as I'd hoped.
So the transition from counsel to part of a technology company, how have you found that? Is it more rewarding, more flexible? Any key differences of note?
Well, I think part of the reason I ended up here is because, I've always had business roles in addition to my legal roles within companies. And so I do think of myself as a business person and a lawyer, not a lawyer, stuck in a business role or vice versa. But certainly, being a principal took a little bit of getting used to. Every day that would go by, and I'm doing whiteboard sessions, and I'm building PowerPoint presentations, and I'm thinking, gee, I shouldn't be spending this much time on this. I got to get back to my legal work, and realizing that no, this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Right. Very interesting. And not usually do we find a person who's got that trifecta, at least on this podcast, of law, insurance, and technology. So those are kind of the key folks who tend to listen to this and are interested in finding out more. You talked a little bit about the analytics side of claims and finding out more about what one claim is going to cost over another. What made you look at that as the most pressing need, or joining Gradient AI, given that they had decided that? What was the rationale behind pushing forward with that against another type of AI implementation in an insurance company?
It's a good question. Gradient AI was founded to address the problem of creeping catastrophics in the workers' comp line of insurance. These are claims that seem innocuous at the outset, but over time they don't go away. They just keep getting worse. And so they sort of beg the question, gee, if I knew now, or if I knew then what I know now, I would have taken a more aggressive approach. I would have done things differently on that claim. And when Stan Smith, the founder, who I've known for 20 years, was setting up the company to address that problem, I asked him, well, that's great. Why aren't you doing that for other lines of insurance? And at the time, his focus was that niche, to address that one issue in that one line. But as the company matured and grew, and he began working with carriers, TPAs, and others, they would ask him, well, this is great, but can you do this for other lines? And at some point, where I was in my career and where the company was, it was just the right time for the company to expand, and I was in a position where I was available to come do it, and so that's how that happened, and I'm thrilled that I did. I think it's something where it's an opportunity to add value. AI models are not going to be correct in every instance. It's not like you look at every single claim and you say, oh, the model gets that perfectly. But over a large set of claims, not only is the model more accurate than an unaided human can be, but we can prove it. And so the ability to apply that against a large number of claims, for example, presents the opportunity to save an enormous amount of money. If you think about it like counting cards, gamblers will count cards to pick up an extra, 1% or 2%, which is not a large percentage. But if you play enough hands, that turns into real money. And so to build an AI model to, manage, a couple hundred claims, may or may not make sense. But once you're talking thousands of claims, once you're talking tens of millions of dollars in annual claim payouts, even a percent or two is an awful lot of money. And our models so far have the ability to deliver a much greater improvement than just a percent or two.
Wow, yeah, that was going to be my next question, the kind of ROI. So you find that on average, just to rephrase slightly, you can hit that 1-2+% mark with most of your insurance clients, and I'm assuming they must be, per that spend or payout comment, they must be relatively large clients on average?
They're really not.
Interesting.
We do have some very large clients, but what we have the ability to do is offer value to carriers, TPAs, self-insureds, along the entire spectrum. And that's because we build our models on centralized, curated data sets. So somebody who comes to us, even if they're let's say a small carrier, they don't have that many claims. They don't have a big enough database to build a model themselves. We allow them to take advantage of this large curated data set that was built up from a large number of sources. And the value of the AI model, which we then will fine tune for each client, is they get the advantage of a model that makes use of the portion of that curated data set that's most relevant to them, that's most similar to the types of claims or the types of policies that they typically see.
Interesting. And for a novice like myself, I'm curious if I was sitting in an insurance company's shoes, thinking about how to implement something like this. Does this typically stick in as a standalone solution? Do you tend to go in with other folks, or what does that look like as a suite of solutions?
That's a great question. And it brings up a couple points. The immediate answer to your question is that we integrate with whatever the native platform is, either on the underwriting side or the claim side. And we think what makes us unique is we believe we are the only company that is using AI exclusively for the insurance industry and addressing both underwriting and claims.
Mhm.
What makes it such an interesting question is it highlights the distinction between the efficacy of the model and the value of the model. A model, and our models typically do, between 10 and 20% better than the organization from a statistical standpoint. But if the organization doesn't make use of the models, if the models aren't, the models' predictions aren't inserted into the organization's workflow, their operation,
Right.
in a way where the organization takes advantage of them,
Hmm.
then the organization isn't going to get anywhere near that benefit. So
Right.
it's very important to us that we integrate, that we understand what a client's workflow is, where and how they're in the best position to take advantage of the model's output, and make sure that we deliver it in that format. We can do it in real time. We can do it batched. We can do it as a dashboard. We can use the model's prediction to drive automated rules-based decision-making, whatever's going to produce the greatest benefit to the organization's ultimate performance.
That makes a lot of sense. Stepping back to a little bit of a higher level question, I suppose, how did you format or accumulate and then train that data? What was the origin story there? And on an ongoing basis, assuming you're grabbing data from lots of different sources and you're grooming that in real time to be incorporated into the model, or would just love to know a little bit more about your data science process?
Sure. Well, the data comes from a number of places. We do collect the data from the historical data that our clients bring to an engagement. We collect the data that accumulates during the engagement. And then we have a number of third-party data sources, both publicly and commercially available, that we either acquire or license, and integrate into our curated data set. It's something that's been built up over time as we continue to expand into new lines. We have the advantage of certain elements that where there's a lot of crossover and we can reuse. There are other things that are much more specific to individual insurance lines, and those portions of the database have grown and will continue to grow as we acquire more clients and deliver more varied solutions.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like it's just going to keep getting better over time.
It should. The basic premise of AI is the law of large numbers. And so, the more data points we have to look at, if we're using that data correctly, the more accurately the predictions should be.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and that's the objective.
That's
it's
exciting.
something that even very large insurance companies only have their own data, and so we can generally do better than they can, because if they come to us, we'll have their data and we have all of our data.
Right. That's exciting. I was going to double click on that a little bit in terms of selling into insurance companies. How do you find that? Is it a tough conversation, I suppose, to take them from what in some cases are in the smaller or maybe more bureaucratic shops paper, PDF, and spreadsheets all the way up to AI? Or do you kind of take that in a gradient style approach and say, maybe we'll first work on just automation of one aspect of what you guys are doing, and then we can start to expand on that? How does that look?
It really depends on where the client is in their progression as it relates to data. The really forward-thinking companies do this as a two-phased approach. The first phase is they look to build their data assets. They consider where they collect data, how they collect it, and how consistently they collect it, and how easy it is for them to manipulate that data. And that is a very worthwhile standalone exercise. And so we have some clients who come to us already having gone through that phase and gone through it specifically to put themselves in a position where they can take advantage of all types of analytics, including AI and machine learning driven ones like ours. But even if a client comes to us and they're, even the least advanced, insurance companies, TPAs, even self-insureds, have more data than they realize that's already in electronic form. And so we'll start with that. Even with a very small amount of data, we can still make predictions. So for example, if it's an underwriting solution and the only thing we know about the claim side is, sort of the binary question, whether or not there was a claim, that's enough to build a model to predict whether or not there will be a claim on future policies. If we're trying to deliver a much more sophisticated model, case level reserving, that kind of thing, then we need a much more detailed set of data from the client. But again, even there, we try to make it as easy as possible. We recognize that we're not going to be a giant ERP solution where a company is going to have to contribute 6 months to 2 years of tremendous IT resources to get something in place. We're a SaaS solution. We'll set up the data collection ourselves. We'll set it up with an automated system that with very little help from the organization in the beginning, we can run the rest. We'll take the data, we'll clean it, we'll curate it, we'll map it to our data set, all with very little time and effort on behalf of the client. And because we can do this, the ROI, big part of the investment is the time, not just the money. We can limit the amount of time. We can speed the delivery of the solution, and nothing we do is different than what companies already do. In other words, we're not an add-on. We're just trying to help them, be more accurate in pricing their new policies or their renewals, and be more accurate in trying to identify their riskiest claims. I mean, that's what they do anyways. And so if we can offer with very little effort on their part to make those things both demonstrably more accurate, that's a pretty compelling argument.
You mentioned a few of them in that answer, and I wanted to double click or check in on some of your thoughts about this. What are some key metrics that I suppose you've seen over and over again that clients want to get better or improve on? And is that something that you tend to encourage in terms of them coming to you, or do you tend to offer them a custom solution based on what you're hearing, even if it's different from what they're asking for? So kind of a two-pronged question. What are the key metrics that they tend to want to improve? And do you have something proprietary that you'll add on top of that?
Another great question. We'll do it both ways. I don't want to sound like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. If somebody comes to us and says, we're sold, we understand that there's, value in this, but, we don't know, how we should take advantage of it. We will offer to them solutions that we've worked through with other clients. We have workflow documents that we can sit down and explain to them. Here's how we've seen other people take advantage of it. Here's a typical underwriting workflow, for example, and here's where we would suggest inserting the model's prediction to use it for this purpose. And we can take them through a demo, that has a narrative, right? Let's talk through how your underwriters do their business and how they would take advantage of this in a typical scenario. That said, as I mentioned before, we want the model's output to be delivered at a time and in a way that it will be taken advantage of to the greatest extent possible by the organization. So we don't do custom solutions in that, we're not a consulting firm. We have sort of off-the-shelf solutions, but we can configure those in different ways. We can deliver those in different ways to allow every client to receive them in a way that will provide the most benefit to them.
That makes sense. A follow-on question to that then, is there any particular off-the-shelf solution or something that you guys are thinking about doing that you're most excited about, or is it all great?
Well, I think, this is an iterative process. Right. I'm a little older than most of the people in most technology startups. Most of our data scientists are closer to my kids' age than my age. So I keep using the analogy with them. It took humankind 40,000 years from the beginning of civilization to getting the first, airplane off the ground. It only took 40 years to get from that point to the jet age. And so, the challenge with AI has been, to get those first planes off the ground. I think the iteration, starts to move very quickly. And that's the exciting part, the ability to deliver, more and more sophisticated models to make, more and more accurate predictions that can be used in more and more, different ways by different clients for different purposes, but with the same, sort of core engineering behind them, the same core data elements behind them.
Right. As a final cheesy question, if you'll humor me, what is your or Gradient AI's insurance or claim superpower?
I love that. I think it, the answer ties in well to one of the first things I said, and that's the reason that I'm here. It's the crystal ball. I really think about it. I'm a very visual person. And that's the image that just pops into my head, and I think back to all those times when, I'm trying to manage our claims. I'm trying to manage our insurance, and I just, I wish, just give me a better idea, right? I wish I could see the future, because right. There are some things that are terrible claims, terrible decisions that you have to make, but they're not difficult decisions because you're in it, and there's no way out of it. The decisions that I always agonized over are the ones where I just don't know, right? If it turns out, if you think about everything that's going on with coronavirus right now, I really feel for many of the governors, who have to make these decisions, not knowing what the future is going to hold. If all the governors knew, or if the governors of the states that have been hit the hardest knew what was going to happen, I think they wouldn't have agonized over, trying to shut things down sooner, more aggressively. But if you don't know that, you can't see the future. That's a really, really tough decision, and you can't help but second guess yourself. To have, a gradient AI crystal ball, that would be my superpower. And to be able to say, well, listen, nobody can predict the future perfectly, but if I look at everything that's happened in the past, I'm now making the most informed decision I can. That's easier. It's easier to make the decision. It's easier to live with the decision, regardless of what happens.
Great answer. So Jeff, how can people get in touch with you?
You can reach us through our website, www.gradientai.com, or through LinkedIn, Jeff Snider, Gradient AI.
Fantastic. Everyone, this is Jeff Snider, claims expert and general manager at Gradient AI. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Jeff.
Thanks a lot, Matt.
Take care.
Bye-bye.